Infrastructure is crumbling and the problems are only getting worse. The pressure to find solutions is hot. Let's talk about why American cities have no water, no electricity, and no money to fix their infrastructure problems. Welcome to the Infrastructure Hot Seat Podcast, hosted by Chad Smeltzer.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Infrastructure Hot Seat Podcast. My name is Chad Smeltzer. I'm your host. Today's guest is Nick Egger, who is the Public Works Director for the City of Rosemount, Minnesota. Thanks for joining me, Nick.
Absolutely, Chad. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you here too, man. We were just talking about Rosemount and Rosemont, Illinois, which kind of, are two similar names for towns. So I'm glad we got that straightened out. But Nick, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you started. I noticed APWA was a big part of your life early.
It has been. Yeah, I've been active in APWA for about 20 years, I'll say. Mid-2000s is when I joined and got membership through that. And I kind of worked my way up through that organization, not with any intentions of doing so at the onset. I even kind of questioned, what am I going to get out of this? How can I fit into the organization? What is there to be inactive? But a few years into the membership and going to conferences and such, I was asked to join one of the committees for our Minnesota chapter on that, the events, membership and special events committee. And that had a lot to do with setting up social events and our annual summer golf outing and handling membership benefits for sponsors annually, reviewing that and making a push to get sponsors to renew and those sorts of things. And just that kind of grew into the point where eventually I was asked to run for election to be a director on the executive committee board. And I did that in 2018, 2019, and then was asked to throw my hat in the ring for the secretary treasurer position, which if you get selected for that or elected for that position, it puts you on a path to becoming the president of the organization after a couple of years. And so I was fortunate enough to get elected to that spot in, I think it was 2020. And then 2 years later, 2022, I was the president and spent a year in 2023 as past president. And now I'm off the board after that long run, but still very much involved in the organization, just a little bit lighter duties these days. So yeah, a full gamut, full circle on that one.
I can imagine, man, just being part of that organization can be very helpful in your, career and, growth and mindset and things like that. The mentoring I hear from those that join the APWA organizations throughout the world, that I've heard, everyone gets a lot of benefits out of that.
100%. Yeah, it's been a great inroads for networking and, getting relationships with people through going to these conferences, going to these social outings and building bonds there. And, in our business, it's always great to have people to lean on when you need, some help thinking through a problem, or if you've encountered a situation you think somebody else has gone through. Maybe shoulders to cry on every now and then if you're, having a hard time with something or a bad experience. There's commiseration, it's therapeutic types of commiseration, but you get so much more out of these types of things than you ever put in.
Yeah, that's awesome,
I
man.
repeat that all the time.
Yeah, and thank you for doing that. You're helping, I'm sure, now mentoring other people that are kind of in that space, I would assume, and.
Yeah. I've been asked for advice from a lot of younger engineers and been a participant on some panels for engineers that are, or even public works professionals, who are earlier in their careers. So it's kind of a funny feeling, I guess, to know that I've been around long enough to now start imparting some of that experience and knowledge. It happens fast, I've been a working professional for over 20 years now. And it's like, wow, I'm in the middle of my career. Where did it go? But super gratifying to be able to lend at least some nuggets of knowledge to those that are coming up behind us.
It's very cool. So what made you want to get into civil infrastructure?
Well, this is a good story, and I like sharing this one. It was not what I set out to be when I started at the University of Minnesota. I was looking at an engineering degree, but it was mechanical engineering.
Mm.
And between that not going so well for me in the first year and a half and not enjoying it, probably because it wasn't going so well for me, I was at a bit of a crossroads wondering, do I change majors now to something else? Do I get out of engineering? What do I do? And I think it was the summer between my sophomore and junior year there, I was doing an internship at the City of White Bear Lake, not in the engineering department, but just helping out with some clerical office type things. It was a full-time summer job, so it was good, and exposing me to municipal government. So that was kind of nice. I got to learn a lot about how cities function and who does what and those sorts of things. And anyhow, I was asked by the city engineer at the time to help fill in on a survey crew for their infrastructure project they were doing that summer. And I did that for a week, and that just flipped a switch in me. I was hooked. I loved being out, seeing heavy equipment, doing construction activity, and working with residents. It was super exciting. And that was what triggered me to change my major to civil engineering. And so I got my degree from the U of M, University of Minnesota, in 2002, and entered the workforce as a minted civil engineer, and I haven't looked back. So yeah, I love telling that story because it's, things don't always work out the way that you think they will, but they usually work out the way they're supposed to for you.
Yeah.
So you just gotta kind of ride it.
Very cool. Yeah. So
Yeah.
did your family have experience in construction or anything like that? Even with mechanical engineering, it's just something you thought about doing?
No, not any engineers in the family. Don't come from that background or construction. I just, as a kid, curious about how things worked. Right? I took apart stuff and played with Legos and kind of liked working with my hands and assembling things and those sorts of activities. And so that was what the intrigue was. And I was encouraged by my parents to think about an engineering degree, just knowing that it would be application of a lot of the things I seem to be curious about. So that's really what led me to an engineering degree after high school.
That's interesting because I used to do the same thing. It's similar, like taking stuff apart, radios and things like that, and figuring out how they work, the processes inside, and learn more about like the devices and things. That was always my thing, trying to figure that out. How they made it. So
yeah,
that was
always
makes
it tick.
Yeah. So you mentioned something about being on a survey crew, and I assume you were GISing and things like that out in the field.
Well, it was a little bit before the days where GIS became mainstream. I did interface with it a little bit, but it was running a total station or a level, just a scope level, not even lasers at that point. This was in the right about the year 2000, 99, 2000. And
Got it.
At least at the City of White Bear Lake, we hadn't gotten into GPS data collection or anything of that sort quite at that point in time. So it was a bit more old-fashioned type of surveying, which was kind of nice because I also ended up having to take courses in that to pursue the civil engineering degree. So I got a little bit of a preview of that before we had to do the coursework and help make that part easier. Kind of knew what I was talking about at the time. But yeah, you're looking through the scope, or you're holding the rod and getting measurements that way, recording everything in a book by hand. It was, maybe just at the tail end of old technology compared to what we're working with in the 21st century here.
Yeah. That has to be a good experience though, because now you kind of know how the process lays out. And now when the technologies come in your way, I assume you're looking at all different types of technology these days when it comes to like planning developments and things. What do you see as this new world of technology and what it has to help you?
Yeah. Well, the thing I always gravitate to, and you probably hear this from others that you talk with, is how is AI going to impact our career field. You can kind of see the infancy of that in some places, but now, I don't really design anything for a living anymore. I'm more reviewing the big picture and have a lot of different areas that I'm overseeing. So I do very little in the way of actual engineering, but what kind of efficiencies are there going to be to assembling a plan and turning around on a project from conceptualization to getting it going in the field with construction? How does that make a project move along quicker? Everybody's seeking efficiencies all the time. And I think in the public sector, like I've been, it's very much appreciated by stakeholders, residents, the least amount of disruption and headache you can cause for them while still accomplishing the things that you need to make their quality of life better through the projects. It's valuable stuff. Certainly, private sector has a lot of motivation to make things more efficient all the time because it matters to the bottom line. And that's kind of similar with the public sector. We're not maybe focused on profit margins, but we certainly are focused on keeping costs down. It all impacts, the residents and business owners in our cities.
Yeah, especially nowadays with inflation and everything going on, it's got to be tough to manage the budgets, I would assume, just trying to get projects done and trying to find it at a reasonable cost and timeline to get it done.
Exactly.
How's the labor shortages been impacting your city?
Well, it's certainly, we're in a time right now where people, I think, feel very empowered to be able to seek other opportunities. There's of jobs out there, and at least in public works, it seems that the pool of candidates has been smaller in recent times, much so for engineers, but also for the labor end of things, the operations staff that we have. We're in a mode right now in Rosemount where we're growing very fast. So we're going to need to be adding staff to help keep up with more and more infrastructure, maintenance, and operations. And at the same time, we've had some departures, people leaving for other opportunities that we've had to backfill. And in many occasions, we've had to go through multiple rounds of soliciting candidates to get people that are qualified and have a background that's fitting of the types of jobs that we're looking to fill. So it is concerning. This is why we try to do as much as we can to promote the career field, not only in colleges that, folks that are pursuing engineering degrees realize that there's good jobs in the public sector that will involve all the skills and knowledge that they're acquiring in colleges, as another option for them compared to private sector engineering. Yeah. But looking to try to advance the awareness of that at younger ages too, so that we get in young people's minds that these are very rewarding, solid career fields to be in, and they ought to start thinking about it and, taking coursework in middle or high school that can help feed into the things that, we're looking for in the labor market.
Yeah, I think what we're heading towards is, obviously understaffing, young generations coming out of college who are more tech savvy, who are going to want to maybe utilize that AI you're kind of talking about. And, right. Once we get, it seems like enough data from our assets within the city, we still work on like grabbing those data points like water or sewer, where everything's kind of located. But I always envision like this world where we get that data and then we have our civil engineers come into the city and then they could start running it like just tech, it's all going to be run by sensors, monitors, things like that. What's kind of your vision on like how things are going to run in the city in the future?
Very good question. I do see what you're talking about, more and more automation or just ways that you can track conditions of infrastructure in maybe not real time, but timely enough that you're not having to do elaborate condition assessments every handful of years or only when you have a possible project coming up, but it would be a way to understand where you're at with a better level of precision any given time.
Yeah.
I think, and then utilizing that information to build out your capital improvement plans and line up projects and prioritize things just to become more and more organized. Again, going back to the theme of being efficient, that can happen in planning projects too, or planning out your grander vision such that you get to a point where you have a game plan that needs only maybe some minor updating any given year.
Yeah.
Versus having to just, go back to square one and build it up. I think we're going to see more and more potential for that to come into the fold here in the coming years.
Yeah. It almost seems like that. I mean, I'm just listening to some of the vendors I talked to on like the network side, and, you start looking at the technology that they've been working on for designing, like substations for developments and things like that, power substations, I should say, more specifically, and how they can generate it in like 2 to 3 hours. Like once they put in enough data, then they can generate the whole power substation in like 2 to 3 hours once they get the right input. Yeah. And I'm like, 2 to 3 hours. I mean, think about all the time in engineering. Traditionally, we used to have to spend, writing it out, designing it. Not, I say we as in, everybody in public works that's, an engineer, the time you spend traditionally putting stuff together versus what the tech could do in a couple hours now. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, very powerful tools there, and almost getting to the point where it's an exponential curve.
Yeah.
Of better, faster, less costly.
Yeah.
Always the goals to strive for.
What are some of the projects you've been working on in the city these days?
Well, I'll start with one that's very close to me, and part of the reason that I pursued the opportunity here, and that is we're in the middle of building a brand new police and public works campus.
Oh, cool.
I'll reverse that. I like to refer to it as a public works and police campus. No offense to our police chief. We get along very, very well, and it's kind of a running joke, but the public works needs to be listed first there, right? Sure. It's a $58 million complex that we started building in July of 2023. And at this point, it's now fully enclosed. Windows are in most places, a lot of drywall up, only interior spaces are starting to get to the point where they're, doing more and more of the finishing work. And we're anticipating moving in there late this fall. It's been a long time coming for the city. They've talked about this going back 20 plus years, to my understanding. Rosemount, again, I touched on the fact that we're growing very quickly here, and we've been working out of some facilities that are 40, 50 plus years old and woefully undersized. You see that in the public works side of things, where we're storing a lot of trucks and heavy equipment items and materials all outside, not weather protected. Of course, in Minnesota, that's an important thing with wintertime conditions that we have. And
yeah.
So that'll be a big gain for us to park everything and store everything indoors in one location versus scattered throughout a bunch of different buildings that we have in our existing campus. But also we've been storing things at private properties, renting space for many years to put our seasonal items away. And now not only we won't have to run over to that location to get it, but we won't have to pay for the cost of storing it either. So there's a big benefit there. Nobody, I mean, as much as Public Works is hungry for more space, and we're getting that, nobody's going to be happier, I think, than our police staff, because they are in an even smaller space, kind of in the lower level, almost basement of City Hall here.
Oh, wow.
And they're a growing department too. That their facility they're just sardines in there, and they have very few windows. Our chief talks a lot about just impact on health and wellness of what their workforce is a very difficult job, no more so than these last 5 to 10 years, and continuing to be that way. And mental, physical health are a big part of it. Natural light is going to be a plus there. We'll have workout facilities so they can have an opportunity to stay in condition. And it's just super exciting. And to have been a part of that since I started here in the planning and developing the final design of it, and now seeing it come into reality it's pretty darn cool.
Cool. Yeah.
So I went on and on about that one, but there's a lot more happening in Rosemount than just our Police Public Works campus. Big announcement that came out publicly about a month ago was that we are getting a data center in town built by Meta, of course, parent company to Facebook and Instagram and other social media platforms. And they're just starting to break ground and do grading on that. It's about an $800 million investment from that company, and on a large plot of land that was in this area of the city that was formerly a ammunition manufacturing facility over many thousands of acres. The data center will only be a couple hundred of this, but the area I'm talking about is known as Umore Park. So the University of Minnesota came into ownership of these 5,000 some odd acres, much of which is in Rosemount, back after World War II, and they've utilized it as a research facility for agriculture and other things since that time. But they're slowly trying to turn over parts of that to private development, and this is one of the first big ones that's come in. So that's getting going. It'll be a multi-year build out, like I said, $800 million. The city's benefiting by way of getting some public infrastructure built as a part of this that will not only serve that campus, but also enable us to serve other development-ready parcels that are nearby or in other parts of the city. So we've got a win from that standpoint. And that's another one I've been involved in ever since starting here, with just the kind of the dance that you do with private development to get to the point of what's it going to be, what are the deal points and what do we need for infrastructure out of it, and so forth. So that's a marquee project, possibly having other large-scale things of that nature coming into town. We don't know yet, but there's been a lot of interest in pieces of land within the city for other industrial business park purposes. And then a lot of housing development going on here too. So it's growth. We're very supportive of that right now, and we have the land to do it. And it's an exciting time for sure. Keeps me very, very busy.
I was going to ask you, how much time does it take to, you talk about the Meta facility. By the time, private sector comes into a town and they start looking for a place to develop, right? Their building. How long does that take? Like, what's that process kind of look like?
Yeah, it can vary depending on the magnitude of the project. But with this Meta project, sometimes you'll get inquiries from, we got a lot of code name projects in town. They don't start out saying, hey, we're Meta, we want to come into town. How do we do that? They have site selection firms that help look at these properties, and they ask a lot of questions about all kinds of things, but very heavy on the infrastructure side, because if you can't serve the property with what they need, then they're going to pass and move on to the next location that can. So there's a lot of this back and forth to try to get them to a point where they've done their due diligence and they're satisfied with what they're looking at, and as well as discussing just development agreement terms and what is each party going to pay for? What's the timeline on being able to deliver this piece of public infrastructure that can help support it, and so on. And those are the bigger picture components of it. But then we also get into, once they decide that they're going to locate, immense amount of detailed plan review that we have to run through to make sure that things are being built to fit into the context and match up with our infrastructure systems and our specifications. There's a lot of land use and zoning and things that our community development staff work on to make sure that the facility is going to be compliant with the city's codes. So Well, long story short, it can vary, but with this one, it's taken the better part of the last 3 years to get to the construction stage. And I understand that some of these inquiries that I referenced had been going on even a year or two prior, just as they dipped their toe in the water,
Right.
to find out more about Rosemount.
It's kind of that public partnership, public-private sector partnership. I mean, because they want to, it's kind of like a dating, it sounds like. It's like, we want to maybe do some business here, but we want to know who you are, right? And it's kind of like that.
100%. That's not far off from how we described it. Are we dating yet, or are we just friends? What is it? It's a dance. Yeah. It's a dance.
And that's progression, right? It's very helpful to have companies like Meta coming into communities like yours, because it provides jobs and economies, that are sustainable, and you really want those in your town, or if you're not growing, what are you doing at that point? I guess is kind of way of looking at it.
Yeah.
What I was gonna say, what does we got like 4 or 5 minutes left. What I want to know a little bit more about you is, what's the future look like for you, Nick?
Yeah, well, where things are heading for me with all the varied types of work going on here and the chance to move into a brand new building,
Exciting.
I don't see myself being anywhere else anytime soon. I mean, there's a long runway ahead of interesting things to work on, and the team that I'm part of here has been an absolute blast to work with. I didn't touch on this earlier, but in 2021, I was one of 3 new department heads that got hired all within about a 6-month span, all coming from different cities. And, we had to kind of gel together, but it to me, it didn't feel like it took that long. We started off on a very good foot, and we're really seems to be that we're hitting a stride here. And that's for all the department heads that I work with. And my public works team is great. They take a lot of pride in what they do. The residents here are super supportive of the city and of our staff. Same with our city council. I should have led with that. Our city council's been phenomenal to work with. They really are rowing in the same direction of their goals and their support for us. It's just it's a optimal situation, I think. Yeah. For us to allow us to continue to do great things. So I'm very much looking forward to continuing this ride, and just the best is yet to come, maybe, huh? Yeah. It's a lot of exciting things now, but there's more ahead of us.
I mean, you're talking about having Meta come in, and you got all this development going on. There's a lot of growth there. So it's going to be a lot of opportunities for you to grow. I assume, with all these challenges that are going to come out of that, all the things you're going to face in the future, it's going to be a lot. How many employees do you have? Just curious.
Right now, our public works department has 29.
Okay.
And that covers the engineering division, GIS. We've got streets and utilities, parks, facilities, and fleet maintenance. So 7 divisions overall, and 29 people, 29 very good public works professionals who all make it happen. And
nice.
We love taking care of the town for the residents, and I think that they really appreciate it.
Yeah, I love Rosemount. When I was there when I was a vendor traveling, and I remember the building going down the stairs to the basement area you were talking about earlier. So I remember the building and stuff like that. And yeah, you're right. It was kind of dreary down there. Not a lot going on. Yeah.
It had its time for, what they designed it to do, but the city's grown a lot in the last 10 to 15 years. And I think I was assembling some statistics for something. I can't recall what it was, but we had a employee retire about a year ago who had been here over 30 years. And I remember pulling some data on, what was it like when he started versus when he retired. And the town pretty much tripled in population in that period of time. So, that's quick.
It is
quick. We're one of the fastest growing cities in the state of Minnesota right now. And
Yeah, it's a beautiful city. That's why I remember, just being there, and all the communities around there are beautiful. Everything's, really
Yeah.
nice and clean, and the streets are like no good shape. I remember not a lot of potholes, things like that. So that was always things I remember about driving through, your town and stuff like that. It's, things I remember. But yeah, hey, thanks for joining me on the show, man. It's great to kind of learn more about you, Nick, and what you're doing in Rosemount, and what the future looks like there.
Hey, it's been my pleasure. I love telling these stories. So anytime.
Yeah. We'll have to come back in another year and get an update on like what's going on with these projects. That's for sure.
You bet. Guarantee there will be more.
Thank you for listening to the Infrastructure Hot Seat Podcast. We hope that this show brought you some insight on relevant topics within the infrastructure world. Please join us every 2 weeks on Tuesday for the next episode. If you're interested in being a guest on this podcast, please set up a 15-minute interview with your host at calendly.com/Chad Smeltzer.